this thing. Okay.
Yep.
Anyways, thank you everybody for coming to the SIP call. Today we'll be talking about the non-custodial NFT staking SIP, which Setsu's proposed a while ago, a few months ago. So we'd love to hear an update on this SIP, and I think could be a good one for before a lot of projects come in, because if we do have the sort of traction on like Ethereum, there's going to be like many different types of tokens who might be involved in staking. So really thank you, Setsu, for taking the time to come here. Today is the 10th of March. Yeah, so just to give people a bit of background, and I think most of you here might know, but maybe there's some first-time listener. But yeah, so this course is all about SIP. But what is SIP? SIP stands for Stacks Improvement Proposal, and it's essentially a document that documents the standard of something. Typically is about the technology side of things, but also it can be governance related stuff like SIP 000. So an example would be Stacks 2.1 is actually SIP 15 and SIP 20, but yeah. So and then we have like NFT standard. Those things require some spec and agreement and a standard on, and that's SIP 9. So if you can come here, propose your idea. If you have any good idea, we can all talk about it. And here you also listen to an overall update of what everything is going on SIP-wise in the pipeline. Yeah, so it's a very collaborative effort here and very informative and educational. So please join on weekly. So yeah, so to give everybody an update where everything's sort of at, we've recently made a pull request for Werner's SIP 11 SIP, and that's a marketplace specific one. So that's, I think, basically almost ready to be reviewed. And there are other earlier ideas in the pipeline that everybody can chime in on, which tend to live on GitHub and Stacks forum. So if you go there, you will see many concentrated conversation over there. That's how we sort of have information all in one place. That helps the SIP author to really develop the idea and move forward. Recently, we did have Julia's code of conduct, sort of had a lot of very interesting conversation, and I think conversation that perhaps just needed to be had. And I think that one might be put on pause a little bit because there's been, I think it require perhaps deeper thinking and maybe some adjusting or rewriting. But we'll see what the SIP author thinks, if she wants to take it forward or not. But yeah, so other things are sort of later in the pipeline, if you like, are the cohort down here, the SIP 15, 20, 19, 18, basically all almost ready to be ratified. So that's, I think, 3 of them at least ready around the 22nd of March. So watch out for that. Stacks 2.1 going live, which is SIP 15. Yeah, and we have, just to highlight a few key sort of SIPs, the wallet client API is a very interesting one because it affects many people, and it could be a way to utilize for BTC transfer, calling the contract when sending BTC, how it interacts with the app side. And you can find those discussion in Stacks forum. So please, sorry, on Stacks Discord. And there's a channel created specifically to capture some of the daily conversation that you can have with the SIP author. So please go there. And the SIP for marketplace trade by Werner. We had a SIP editor meetup last Friday to talk about this one. So because we understand there's a need for this in order to unlock some of the abilities for SBTC. So we had a really productive meeting last week, and basically we're gonna be able to push that SIP forward in the next few weeks. And yeah, so we had really great recommendation of what to do from Raphael. So thank you very much, Raphael. And yeah, so that's I think that's the closest one, being the one to be reviewed by the SIP editors. Yes, so this Stacks code of conduct, I think, is being put on post. Yeah, even there was a lot of conversation on GitHub. So Munib also chimed in. But for me, I think for everybody in the Stacks community, it's just really great to see the turnout, to see the engagement for this specific SIP. And I think it's not about this SIP specifically, but it's about the engagement we can get, the involvement we can get from the community to have their voices heard and be able to give them the space to really tell us what to think. And they are actually influencing the direction of the SIPs, which is sort of what we want at the end of the day, to not just have a SIP not being discussed out in public. We want to have many SIPs being debated, talked about. Yeah, so I think at the end of the day, it was a great almost exercise or result that we actually had so much engagement from the community. So yeah, thank you, Juliet, for that. And just want to point people to sort of early feedback that Jude is looking for the L1 speed improvement. So like I said, a lot of things actually sort of these conversation are on Stacks forum, on GitHub. So I try to bring those things to light to the community, and I'll be sharing on Twitter too to try and get feedback. But yeah, here is a really good example that the developers really want to get feedback from other people in order to shape the future of Stacks network. So yeah, please chime in on these topics and express your opinion. So with that being said, I'm gonna go into the main topic of Setsu's SIP for non-custodial NFT staking. So yeah, I'll stop sharing screen and I'll let you take over. And maybe you want to give a quick intro to yourself, and yeah, and tell us about your SIP and maybe quick background, but also the latest updates.
Yeah, of course. Well, first off, thank you so much for everyone that makes it out here. Again, whenever I stop by these calls, it just reminds me of how much effort goes into this community, every week. And so here, thank you for hosting it, and everyone else, thank you for making it out. My name is Jesus Nahara, or Set Zeus, and I love doing clarity work along with Set Burn, who is also on this call. We've sort of pivoted our agency towards working on just Bitcoin layer 2 things with a core focus on Stacks and Clarinet, and Clarity. So I've had the privilege of working with a lot of teams already, a lot of cool people in the ecosystem. And from a lot of that work, there was one pattern that I kept on seeing from teams that were launching NFTs. And there was a twofold pattern. One was any team that launched an NFT collection almost always went on to launch another derivative one, right? Whether it was a smaller one, whether it was a bigger one, one for burning, one for, maybe aggregating different NFTs together. That was a very common theme. And I don't think that's gonna stop at anytime soon. And the second theme that we saw is that NFTs were asking a lot to implement staking. And so I think staking in itself is a really big question that I'm going to bring up towards the end that I'd love for us to discuss as a community. But I did see a lot of that pattern of staking and a lot of teams asking me to implement, staking along with how could we make it work with other NFT collections. And so that eventually led me down the path of realizing that those two behaviors likely aren't going to change. And the third driver here was the realization that ultimately NFTs and FTs are the only assets that are now defined not just with SIPs, but with clarity functions within the language itself. And so the deeper and deeper understanding we have of how to work with these two asset classes and how they can work with each other, I think the healthier and the better we can create a standard around that, the better it's going to be for the community as a whole. So that, again, we don't necessarily repeat mistakes that have been done and or make sure that we have a standardized way of working with both NFTs and FTs. So that being said, this SIP specifically has been doing R&D into what type of architecture works best when staking multiple NFTs for a single fungible token. And I'm going to drop this link here that I'm going to be not reading off of, but I'm going to be following the structure of as I walk you guys through the latest update. And yeah, feel free to just open that up, read it on your own time. There's the GitHub code linked in the front page. So if you guys want to click into that at any point, go for it. So before getting into that, point of this SIP was, again, doing research into what are the best architectures and then realizing from there what, if anything, should be submitted as a SIP for this purpose. So that being said, I see a lot of you guys have the document open. The most important part that I kind of want to start with is going down to the second page where we talk about definitions, just so we have a good starting point for what we talk about moving forward. And I do want to say that towards the end, I want to go into community questions. And one of the biggest questions I have as a whole is, what do we even want to consider staking? Because based on that, we should design things differently. I'll open that towards the end, but for the purpose of this discussion, one of the biggest problems with creating this standard is not just that we would have to, if we have a standard, then all new NFTs have to change to that standard. But the biggest sort of challenge here is how can we make it backwards compatible for NFTs that have already launched and can't change the contract, right? And so that's where the biggest problem and sort of this challenge comes from. And that comes from the fact that, again, the majority of NFTs out there already, you cannot stake them unless it is custodial out of the box. Again, there is a possibility that collections moving forward, just like how we pseudo adopted the non-custodial marketplace functions that you guys see in NFTs now, right? So buy in USTX, list in USTX, et cetera, unlist in USTX. Those are functions that aren't SIPs, but we kind of use them in all contracts. Again, unless you want to start doing that and make more changes for the NFT, the biggest challenge here is, again, how do I accommodate for NFTs that have already launched, don't really want to change anything, and how do we do this in a safe way, or in at least in a least dangerous way? So that being said, definitions: custodial staking, non-custodial staking. I hope it's clear. Custodial is when you own custody of your NFT. And so when we're talking about custodial staking, we mean you send your NFT to someone else has possession of your asset. Non-custodial staking is what a few teams have implemented, and it's basically just a way of blocking either transferring or listing if something is staked without it using the user's wallet. So those are the two current default modes of staking. And then from that underneath, I want to talk about reward period and reward rate. So reward period is what should we define? How long should we define a period of a user has staked an asset, they should be getting some reward? Coming back to it over and over, I think this should almost always be a constant, and it should be a single block. And I'll get into why later, but I think there is a way of setting up the reward rate and the reward period in a dynamic way that kind of keep things really clean. So reward period, I usually think of one block. So an NFT that is staked earns X amount per block. The reward rate is the X, right? So if they're staking for some token, how much are they staking? How much are they gaining per that one block? Well, it depends on the NFT, which is where we start getting a little bit more mathy into how we calculate the reward rate. But before we do, I kind of want to pause here and ask if anyone has any questions before I go into the two different modes of implementation that I found or that I currently have working. Again, any questions just on the definitions? I know they're very high level. I know they're very introductory, but I don't want to leave anyone behind. So want to start from scratch.
A very good idea, that's all.
Okay.
And then it could be used also when you are providing a kind of NFT that means a kind of a service that if you have it, you have a kind of a service for the application. So then it's a way to stimulate the people not to give away that and keep on with the service. I think it's a good way of like a reciprocity way of encouraging people to carry on with using the application. It's a different way of seeing it.
Right. And yeah, I guess to answer Jen's question, the whys have been very different, and I think they will continue to be different. And I think I'd like to get your participation at the end when we talk about even what is staking, because it could boil down to just ownership, right? And now we're kind of just talking about how do we make ownership of the NFT much more useful, which is a different-ish conversation. But most of the teams have proposed staking NFTs to, one, reduce liquidity, and two, give more value to holding that asset, right? Whatever utility you get for staking that NFT. Okay, so let's go into the two modes the two architectures, and one is a monolith architecture and one is a star architecture. And so let's start with the monolith. As the name implies, this is all done in a single gigantic contract. And again, all of this is in the GitHub. And so if you guys look at the GitHub and then click into the directory for contracts, there should be one for monolith, one for star. If you click into them, you'll see what I'm talking about.
If you want to share your screen and show them GitHub, that might be good.
Okay, so here, for example, this is the monolith that we're looking at. And yeah, so you guys can see on the left here, let me close all these up. Okay, right now we have monolith and star. And if you click into monolith, you'll see that there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 contracts. Out of those 7 contracts, 3 of them are trait contracts, the commission contract, SIP09 and SIP10. Then we have 1 fungible token. So the fungible token that we're testing with an example FT. And then we have 2 NFTs, one that requires custodial staking, AKA it's old. We have to consider how we can make it backwards compatible. And the other one is if we could launch a perfect NFT that's ready for staking now, what would it look like? So at the end though, as you guys see, there's only one really unique contract, and that is the staking contract that is open, and it is massive. I do go over the functions or an outline of them on the document. So I don't want to go line by line on this because I will take forever. But I guess let me see if I can give you guys a preview here. Okay, cool. So this is an example of all the functions that we would include in a monolith architecture. So active collections, AKA what collections are whitelisted for staking with this contract. Add admin address for whitelisting. So if we want to add more team members that can add collections, whitelisting a collection, the multiple of that collection, and I'll get into the math behind this in a second. And then the status of this collection that's being added. Again, is this an old collection that requires custodial staking, or is this a new one that, cool, we can do it non-custodial? Admin emergency unstake, claim all stake, claim collection stake, claim item stake. And actually, I do want to say, I don't think claim all stake and claim and unstake all should work. And that's actually another point I want to bring up at the end when it comes to the questions as a community. And then, yeah, most of these are pretty straightforward. Get generation, get stake details, stake, unstake, remove admin address, etc. Exactly what you guys would kind of expect in a monolith contract. And now I kind of want to go over the math of like how things would be calculated on this one. And again, the math would be calculated relatively the same, but what I think makes the most sense here is every collection should be gaining or generating a relative amount that's relative to the most unique or the most highly rated NFT collection. So to give an example, I think Megapont would be the easiest example. Let's say Megapont did that you could stake some NFTs for the Mega token. Giving their collection, you would assume that Megapont collection, the OG, the one with only 2,500, very limited supply, you would get the highest reward for staking those. And then other collections, like the ones that have 5,000 or 10,000, then you would expect less of a reward. And so that relative part is where this function comes into play. And it's where I suggest that we go with setting a maximum reward for whatever the most valuable collection is. And then they gain one per block. And then every other collection that we submit, there's a collection multiplier that is a percentage of that max reward. And so that keeps things relative. And that means where, for example, if you have an ecosystem where 5 NFTs are staked for one fungible token and they all have different rates, by changing just the max reward, you would be changing the reward rate for all the other collections at once. So decided to do the reward generation in that way. And that's why you guys see collection multiplier and max reward. Yeah. Again, staking mechanism above is anchored around a simple question: what should the most valuable collection generate per block? And then work backwards from that. And then, yeah, key functions in this contract, as you guys saw the contract below, these are all the key functions for it. Again, everything that's claim all, there's an asterisk to it because there's something I learned during this process that, again, we definitely want to talk about. And at this point, I kind of want to pause and ask if anyone has questions specifically about the logic of this architecture. Again, not comparing it to the star one because we have yet to go through it, but questions if anyone is unclear in terms of how this is structured, where it's just one mega contract. We're registering NFTs to this contract. And then this contract itself is where you would stake and where you claim. And then the fungible token contract itself is just checking, hey, am I being called by the monolith staking contract? And if it is, cool, it would go ahead and mint rewards. And actually, I think I lost my conversation. So I don't know if any of you guys are talking. Okay, cool. I pulled it back up. All right, cool. Yeah, if you guys have any questions, continue typing them away. If there are no questions about this part, I want to get into the star part, which was significantly more challenging, but definitely learned a good amount that I'm excited to share with you guys.
Are you presenting the two models? Are they both you choosing one over another, or you're saying they're both? Yeah, we have to pick. You have to pick.
So I'm now at the point where I think after this week, I want to sit down with like 3 to 5, really, really good clarity engineers and get their feedback as well. I will give you my preference after we go over star, but I am leaning one way to submit it. Yeah, we definitely have to pick one to submit, but yeah.
Sting asked, this is custodial where you send it, or it doesn't matter here?
We accommodate for both. And that's why, that's where I'm saying, yeah, you have to, that's why I have 2 examples here, NFT A and NFT B. One of them is an old NFT that you would have to send custody for it to be staked. One is a new NFT that if we launched today and we build, ideally, it would not have to leave custody of a wallet. So yeah, accommodating for both. Cool. So now let's go over the star architecture. This was really challenging, but I think it's really, I think there's more challenges and it's more complex, but I think the pros of it will outweigh the negatives. So first, let me go ahead and open up this part. And so this is a little bit more advanced and kind of only makes sense if you're familiar with the SIPs itself, with the SIPs themselves, or with writing traits. But for the second one, the star, I wanted to try something different. And that was, again, instead of having a monolith, how do we, decentralize or de-risk this by not having everything be on one contract? A lot of reasons why I wanted to consider this. The most simple being, if it has a lot of NFTs, a lot of custodial NFTs to the one monolith, then that is a single point of failure. If anything ever happens to that monolith contract, it would be a disaster for everything that's staked. And again, if there's a lot of collections actively staking, that seems like an extremely dangerous single point of failure. So for that reason, I want to consider a star architecture. The challenging part about the star architecture is that it still requires a staking contract. However, we strip most of the logic out of it, except for 2 or 3 user activities that I start mentioning here. If you guys scroll to where I'm at on the Google Doc, this is exactly what's in the traits that you guys were looking at, but there are 2 different traits that I define here. One is stake main. And again, the main, this is basically the main contract deployed by a team that would signal that they're interested out in building out an NFTs to FT staking system. Again, it doesn't activate any one collection, anything like that. It just signals to the network that, hey, the Megapont team is about to start like an NFTs to FT ecosystem, or et cetera, et cetera. Ultimately, they only have 3 user functions or 3 responsibilities. So 1, add and remove admins to the Megapont, to this control contract. Again, I'm iffy on this idea as well. And that is something else I learned and I want to talk about at the end. And that's just admins in general. 2, adding or removing whitelisted collections, right? So this is the team that's going to say, hey, we're adding okay, Megapont, now we're adding the robot factory, now we're adding whatever. And then the third is updating collection multipliers and bonus features. Bonus features I didn't talk about too much. I'm not going to get into it in this conversation at this point, but it's basically things like, bonus rewards for X amount of blocks or something like that, but not really critical at the moment. Okay, and then if you guys go underneath it, we can read the trait definitions for stake helper. And stake helper is essentially the controller or the container for staking one NFT. And so this is where I'm saying that like this architecture requires a lot more contracts, right? Because instead of one monolith, you now have one main contract, and then you have n amount of container contracts or helper contracts based on how many NFTs you are that you want to add to this. When it comes to the helper traits, you guys can see them here. I have them highlighted at the moment. They are such as, get contract, get multiplier, get custody status. So is this a collection that does require custody or is it not? Get staking data for a specific item from that collection. And then, again, get all stakes, meaning for a specific user, stake item, unstake item, and claim item, which I think claim, as I'll show you guys, ended up not being here. So ignore that. Okay, cool. First off, I want to talk about what is the upside to this. Why, like, this seems much more confusing. Okay, the upside to this is, again, for every container or every, staking helper contract, if there is an NFT that requires custody, we're now offloading the custody to that one container or to that one controller contract. So go back to the Megapont example or an imaginary example. Let's say we have 5 NFT collections that we want to offer interaction with that you can stake for a fungible token. In the monolith model, all 5 of those are staked on this contract. In this star model, every NFT is custodied in its own container or its own helper contract. So now instead of all the NFTs in this one, all the NFTs are now staked in the helper contracts. Again, the point of that, I hope you guys see the upside of that is, significantly less risky in terms of one big central point of failure. If anything does happen to, the custody's NFT, it'll be in like the singular helper contracts. Yeah, what else? Yeah, again, I guess I want to go over this and show you guys probably my favorite part of this. Give me one second.
While you find it, if I may just remind people that as far as I remember from the last conversation, this doesn't even exist in the Ethereum world. Is that right? And you are basically like spearheading this new research, if you like.
Yeah, no, there definitely isn't a standard for how this is architected, but teams in Ethereum have also done this, but they also do not have a standard for this. So it seems like the behaviors are universal, right? Any blockchain that has NFTs, we're seeing those 2 behaviors of the teams launch derivative NFTs, and then at one point the teams offer some sort of staking or ownership interaction with those NFTs. I want to go over my favorite part in this and that I'm highlighting right now. And again, you can only appreciate this if you're deep in the woods, but my favorite part in this is I didn't even know you could do this, but you could define traits by having other traits with like defined in the parameters. I didn't know this was possible, like in line 19 until I got this far in. That makes me very, very confident in what we're doing here, because when it comes to, again, the main admin contract or like the stake one, whenever you add a whitelisted collection, we could actually hard check that the principal we're passing in this parameter does actually implicitly adhere to everything in this trait that we're defining below. So didn't know nested traits were possible. That's an extraordinarily cool feature of Clarity. And I'm not sure if anyone else is using that in production. And if someone is, definitely correct me. But that's definitely something I learned while doing this R&D that is really, really interesting. We're definitely pushing the limits of what's possible here. And yeah, so this is all.
And that wouldn't be possible on Ethereum? That's a sort of more unique. Okay.
At this point, I don't know. Yeah. But cool. Yeah, so that is an overview of the two architectures. Again, I understand the star one is way more complicated. So if you guys do have any questions about that, like, let's get in. Yeah, I mean, let's get into the questions on the star architecture now. So I can clear up any confusion.
Yeah, if anybody got any question, please just unmute your mic. Maybe it's more of a marketplace or builder sort of audience that we need more questions from. Do you think?
So I have one question.
Sure.
So this looks really cool. I'm the one thing I think I'm missing is so maybe if you could dig in a little bit on the reason that this whole thing needs to be standardized. Like what I'm picturing is the having a trait for the stake and unstake item that an NFT could implement makes sense to standardize, but the rest of it, it feels to me, I think maybe I'm misunderstanding, but it's like the rest of it seems like it's specific to one particular, like, I don't know if you call it a marketplace or whatever, that's managing staking. So could you clarify that a little bit?
Yeah, sure, Bryce. Because yeah, and I guess the best example, and they haven't launched this yet, but they've talked about it enough. The Stackulants team, and I guess CrashPunks too. Both CrashPunks and Stackulants, they both want to have their own fund. They're both launching their own fungible token in the near future. Both of them, they want to be able to earn that you earn the fungible token by staking their NFTs, right? So both CrashPunks and Stackulants wanted that standardization in terms of like, how do they set up, what rates are all the same, like how do they all communicate together to make sure that like the supply isn't removed at once, or if one user has multiple stakes and they want to claim all of them. And I think the biggest reason of why I started working on this is going back to Bitcoin monkeys and how when they launched the fungible token, when they launched their first fungible token, the banana token, you could stake monkeys for it. But then when they launched mutant monkeys later, this original fungible tokens contract wasn't flexible enough to handle adding now staking mutant monkeys or baby monkeys or anything like that. And so they end up launching the slime token. And so instead of having both of those parallel fungible tokens, if we had just standardized how to stake multiple NFTs for one FT correctly with the first one, then they would have just stayed with the banana token and not needed to launch parallel fungible tokens for all the NFTs. So that's the idea of like standardizing this this approach, because again, multiple teams that do end up launching FTs tend to have multiple NFTs. And so how do we accommodate for doing that smoothly?
Okay. And so is there any, so if say Stackulants and CrashPunks, like you mentioned, both launch something, their their multiplier and their max reward per block are completely unrelated. Is that correct?
Yep, they would
Yeah.
both, they would both, exactly. They would both write their own differently. Crash punks, they would probably say, hey, if you stake a crash punk, the OGs, that should be worth the more. Let's give that the highest reward. And then every other NFT collection that they submit, they could just do relative to that. So 50% of, the max, 75% of the max, et cetera.
Mhm.
Again, answering like why package them up together, this is one of those reasons, right? So if you wanted to universally change that reward rate, you could just change the max reward rate, the constant, and it would trickle down for like all the other ones as well.
Got it. Thanks.
So the primary sort of use cases would be an NFT project want to launch multiple coins on their roadmap. Would that be fair to say?
No, the optimal is the opposite, which is what we've seen.
Oh, right. Yeah, I see.
Teams launch multiple NFTs, but they launch one FT, which makes sense.
Yeah. So, for example, like just using the big project as an example, could be like Bored Ape Yacht Club. They want to have their Genesis collection, and they're gonna launch like a dogs collection, which they did, and they want to have Mutant, and they will have their roadmap probably like 5 years in the future. So whatever they launch in the future, NFT wise, they can all tie back to this ape token that they have. Would that be correct to say?
Yeah, and Bryce, I hope that clears up sort of the point of the standardization here is to make not only accommodate for NFTs that have already launched, but to help future proof for other NFTs that want to be added later on.
Yeah, cool. And because I think they have like side collections, like other deeds also, in the yoga labs world. So they may have sub brands that may potentially want to tie back to each other.
Exactly. And speaking of that, I actually want to point out one of the other, and again, I definitely said this, but I'm leaning towards the star architecture. And I think another big pro that I didn't really think about until almost finishing this is, what if there's what if like a team wants to, involve a collection within their ecosystem as well. With the monolith, you can't do that, right? So like, let's say, for example, Crash Punks, the way the contract is written, you can only do custodial staking. So if you wanted to stake a Crash Punks with the monolith, you could only stake it to that one monolith contract, and you would only be getting the snow token from Crash Punks. Let's say for some reason, there's a cross promotion. Stackulance says, hey, we want to reward Crash Punks holders. If you guys want to stake and get some of the plant token that we're serving as well, you guys can join our community. With the monolith model, that would be impossible. With the container model or the star model, all that would have to happen is the Stackulance team would just admin whitelist this Crash Punks container that already exists. And now, for example, if I just stake my Crash Punk, I'm just staking it to this one contract, but yet I'm earning reward from these two teams.
Yeah.
So
may I ask, I haven't heard the word ordinals being mentioned so far. So if, for example, Megapunk right now, they had launched a Megapunks, and obviously the Genesis is stacks, everything is on stacks. So how can Megapunk tie the new ordinals collection, whether it's on Emblem Vote via Emblem Vote locked on Ethereum side in a contract, which Megapunk has, plus now people are able to claim their native Bitcoin ordinals. So they have now two separate sort of it's under one collection, but lives on two different networks. How can this launched collection tie back to the mega token?
Yeah, I think cross chain, I don't know how I would do that, but I would say I am looking at both XBTC and SBTC and trying to keep up with everything that's happening. Thank you, Jude, and thank you a lot for being here. That genuinely means a lot. You're, yeah, I mean, the OG here. But yeah, I'm looking at everything happening with SBTC, XBTC, and everything happening with the S ordinals. This is this is why I really like this is why I think this standard is cool, as long as they're both. And I know XBTC/SBTC should be a fungible token. As long as that's a fungible token and ordinals are an NFT that adhere to SIP09, this is going to work. Everything here is going to work out of the box. So I don't know how to do it. You know, I don't know what, if anything's possible across chain with, you know, Bitcoin, but the moment that we do get ordinals pegging into swords, then yeah, as long as they're actually SIP09s, this will all work.
Cool.
So again, with that, I'm probably going to get to the last part of this in community questions. And then we can go ahead and just, you know, open the floor up and just call it a day. This is more so, the community questions is more so thoughts I have and sort of things I've learned along the way. And honestly, the first one's probably the biggest and something that I have found myself going back to over and over. And that is essentially like, what is staking and how do we care to define it? And I think ultimately there's 3 different ways of thinking about it that are worth considering. And that's one, custody. So very strictly, the state of staked means it's defined by who owns the asset as defined by the clarity function NFT-get-owner ? The pros to that, it's, well, obviously, like if we have that standard, great. Like we have a universal clarity standard available. And it's obviously the most compatible with existing NFTs, right? Every existing NFT has a transfer function. Therefore, every existing NFT should be able to adhere to something that requires custody. The cons are very obvious, and that's the highest surface area for possible loss of assets. The next question is, do we consider staking? Maybe we consider it owning something, but blocking the ability to transfer something, right? And that is kind of the mode that we have now. So whenever anyone discusses non-custodial staking in stacks, this is what they mean. There's usually an asserts function that just checks whether, that literally just checks like a Boolean state of, is this NFT staked? And, you know, if it is staked, then you won't be able to transfer or list the NFT. So this is another way of thinking that's, you know, there's a couple of pros there. Owners keep custody of assets, obviously more secure, probably the biggest upside. Downsides, the biggest, well, actually a couple downsides. One, we still can't do anything about NFTs that have already launched and require custody. And then 2, requires teams and devs to, it forces them to make additional changes to their contract moving forward if we only do this. I don't really like imposing that, you know, that NFTs have to do this, because then it almost means like we're encroaching on SIP09. So a couple of trade-offs there. And then the last one is just straight up like, maybe what we want to, like, maybe staking as a word or as a verb is a mistake. And all we really mean is ownership. Because at the end of the day, like, you know, it's hard for me to define what should be like the state of staked and what's the difference between this second option and this third option. Because if the second option would just require like an additional button click of unstaking, that's literally just what, like network fees for no really good reason. Meanwhile, ownership, well, as long as you still have it, then you clearly haven't transferred it or listed it. Maybe you've listed it, so you're earning things, but yeah. So this is kind of like the first really big question that, like, as I was going through this, I was just really reviewing the word staking with myself, and, you know, making sure, well, and again, just sort of evolving the definitions here and realizing we're not really even sure what that means. And so I am kind of curious to hear like people's perspective on this. Like, was the word staking just a mistake as a verb? Like, should we just consider ownership the same as staking? And what we really meant is, like, you know, you having ownership means you have utility. Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm curious to get other people's opinion on here, because this obviously could change the way we make things. I do want to give a caveat. When it comes to Badger's contracts, there's one we're working on where we're going with, where we try like the last option, where it's like, we don't really care anything else outside of like, you have this asset and you can claim a reward, and all we check is the last time you claimed a reward. And that's kind of all you really need. And so I'm not, yeah. And so I'm really kind of not sure which one of these three definitions I agree with the most. So very curious to hear some feedback here.
Like, excuse me, like staking, it feels like lending, or
yeah, I guess yeah, the first one is basically it is essentially lending, right? The custodial one is basically you send your asset to someone else, you've lent it to someone else. Yeah, I'm not sure why we called it staking then, because that definitely could have just been called loaning.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, I'm just watching the time. We've only got a couple of minutes. Yeah. So maybe, do you mind if we just close it out and we can take, oh, Ego raised the hand.
Cool.
Thank you so much for this overview. You've definitely put a lot of thought into this. I'd love to, it looks to me that you're taking a very kind of principle-based approach to this. I'm curious as to whether you have a chart as to how these, you know, different levels of custody map to kind of real use cases in different blockchains to see, to give a more maybe tangible definition for them. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think I need to spend more time doing that. I think in general, my one big takeaway has been that like everyone's just throwing around the word staking when it hasn't been very defined. And I think that, yeah, that is one realization where I think a good exercise would be just that. Like, what are even the different utilities that can happen from these three different methods?
And a couple of more thoughts is I'd love to see where stacking fits into this at all. And as well as, is it you're trying to define a single dimension to define this concept of ownership, where, you know, ABC like in a different point in a line, but perhaps it's a maybe multi-dimensional thing, maybe 2 dimensions better represents this. So those are other thoughts, you know, into how you can continue, you know, what's you want to find out what's the minimal dimensionality space that you can embed these things, right? And maybe it's not 1 dimension, maybe it's 2, because maybe the complications that you're thinking just don't fit well, and that's why you're not getting it. So maybe adding another dimension might might be enough. Just thoughts.
No, super appreciated, and yeah, happy to continue that conversation at any point, because yeah, I think I'd be curious to just do analysis of like, what are the different utilities from these different ones alone, and yeah, what are the different dimensionalities that we can surface from those utilities. Yeah, sorry. So to clean it up really quickly, what else did I learn? Open questions. So yeah, I mean, to open it up, another SIP consideration, that this is why I was having an asterisk on anything that says all, claim all, unstake all, etc. I think whenever we're considering a SIP, we should probably not encourage convenience things that are hacky workarounds. Not sure how many of you guys are familiar with it, but using a list with a trait is extremely hard. And then using a tuple is also extremely hard, to the point that like there's a lot of inconsistent behavior. And so that's something that I ran into. That's something that I ended up stripping away for convenience, because again, if it's not working as we expect in production, then probably no reason to have it be part of any standardization. And the last thing, and I'll leave it at this, admin architecture. Yeah, everything's supposed to be decentralized, and you know, when you first start learning Clarity, it feels cool to not have the word admin on there until you deploy things that don't work, and all of a sudden you wish you had admin level permissions into the core functions. I think that alone is something interesting as a community we should look into. Like, what do we want to consider, like what an admin quote unquote is when it's a smart contract, and what behaviors should be expected from that.
I wonder whether some of these questions you could post them on Stacks forum, because that's where sort of maybe the community-wide sort of question like this could get different discussion going. Or
again, these are all just open-ended questions I have after going through this exercise that I probably will put on the forum there. Cool.
Any last word? Or because I'm just wary of the time, don't want to keep everybody too much.
No, I'm honestly surprised I talked for this long without stopping. So
no, it's amazing to hear all this work that's going in, and it's really educational, because it can now educate about your idea or development and encourage others to do the same. So really appreciate. I'll just maybe close it out if you don't mind.
Yep.
So yeah, thanks everybody for coming. Just let me do a quick share. Sorry, we're a little bit over time, but just give me 1 minute. So yeah, thank you everybody for coming today. It's amazing to see people still coming here and learning about the different SIPs. Thank you, Jesus, for coming to explain about your SIP. And actually just want to let everybody know, Jesus actually has 100 days of clarity on YouTube. You can learn every day. Please go there and follow him on Twitter and learn about Clarity. If you're new or developer looking to be developer, it's a great resources on there. So I'll leave the rest. But thank you everybody for coming, and see you next week. Thank you, Setsu. Bye.